I got a diagnosis in 2018. It was a brain tumor, more specifically a pituitary tumor, not the good kind. I knew that brain surgery was inevitable, but I also knew from Heal and I knew from several other films that I had created that health is a product of many things, and our potential to impact our physical health is much greater than we think it is. 5 years ago today, I was a 1% miracle. So you can be too.
Welcome to the Heal with Kelly podcast. I'm Kelly Noonan-Gorse, and every week I speak to the leading doctors, healers, spiritual teachers, and scientists to find out what is truly possible when it comes to healing. I also interview real people with extraordinary healing stories. My philosophy is, what's possible for one is possible for all. Thank you for joining me on this beautiful journey of remembering our divine nature and tapping into the truths that shall set us free. Hey everyone, and welcome to the Heal with Kelly podcast. I am your host, Kelly Gorse, and today I am very excited to bring you my dear friend, Danette Wolpert Holman. She's got an amazing story, and she's a big part of my journey because she founded the ILLUMINATE Film Festival, which is where Heal had its world premiere. So she helped me birth my baby out into this world. A little bit about Danette. She's a visionary and entrepreneur and thought leader in the field of transformational media. She is the founder, as I mentioned, of the ILLUMINATE Film Festival, which is the world's premier festival for conscious cinema. Her focus is on unlocking global human potential by inspiring positive change from within. Under the ILLUMINATE umbrella, Danette founded the Conscious Film Convergence, the world's first annual gathering of transformational film creators, producers, distributors, funders, and marketers dedicated to collectively enhancing the quality, quantity, accessibility, and impact of conscious media. Danette has focused her energy on elevating consciousness and catalyzing personal, community, and planetary change, including as a Holo Movement founding steward, Sedona Cultural Collaborative board member, and graduate of Mindful NYU's Inner MBA program. She is the recipient of the National Association for Women Business Owners Visionary Award for Entrepreneurial Excellence. And the list goes on. Danette, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Kelly. I'm really excited to be here.
So there's so much to cover today, but why don't we talk about who Danette was leading up to founding the ILLUMINATE Film Festival? Were you always on a spiritual journey? Did you have a life before and then kind of had an awakening that set you on this path? I'm curious.
Well, Kelly, I think that founding a conscious film festival would have been the last thing on my list if I were to predict what I would do with my life. When I was younger, I was on a completely different path. I went to engineering school, then I went to business school, and then I went to go work in management and technology consulting in corporate America. And that is certainly where I thought I was supposed to be, and really worked hard to get there, and then wanted to continue to work hard to, climb the corporate ladder. And one day at a client in Chicago, I looked over and I saw this magazine open, and it was actually an Outward Bound ad where there was like this woman, scaling, a mountain, on a rope. Anyway, I looked over and I just thought, this woman's living her passion and her purpose, and am I? And I realized that, I was going to need to take a leap. So fast forward, I ended up needing to take two leaps. One was kind of out of Ernst & Young and into the field of film, because I felt film really had this incredible potential to uplift and inspire and educate and transform. When I say transform, at the time, I meant really understand one's true potential, from a very grounded space. I came from a family where logic is king, right? Like if
Hmm.
you can't see it, it doesn't exist. And so, I was thinking about, how to tap human potential, but there was like a whole piece of the puzzle that was missing still at that point. And then the second leap was I was already in film festivals. I had worked several years in film festivals, and I was the associate director at Miami Film Festival at the time. And I ended up taking another leap from there, simply because I knew I was closer to who I am and what my purpose is, but not quite there. We had a lot of incredible content at Miami that was inspiring and uplifting, but we also had Cuban zombie movies. And not that those are bad movies, but it just didn't speak to my heart and my purpose. So after 5 years there, I took another leap into a 1 year Eat, Pray, Love, which I actually myself call Seek, Pray, Love, to kind of find out like who am I and what am I doing here? And that actually took me to Sedona, where I got the download per se, and I realized that starting a conscious film festival was something that was I was really being called to do.
That's amazing. And at the time, what year was that?
That was 2013.
Okay. And so I'm curious, you went on a 1 year pilgrimage to find yourself. And did you have um any like spiritual kind of practice? Did you just were you called to that something was missing and needed to seek it out?
I definitely knew that something was missing. I just didn't know what it was. And I didn't even know that it was spirituality or, connection to source. Until I met a woman at the Miami Film Festival. We shared an office, and there was something magical about the way she lived her life. And, I would watch magical like synchronicities happen to her all the time. And I thought, the level of coincidence in her life is just mind blowing. There has to be some secret to this. And, she really could really intuit, how to relate to people and connect with people. And she could also kind of sense what she was going to need, or what she had to do. And it was like, how could you never be wrong? It was like a real inquiry on my part. And I literally asked her to tell me what it was so that I could live my life that way too. And she was like, no, 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 that's not how it works. And she said, this is something you have to go find for yourself. And that is what propelled me to kind of leave, like a really steady career, in the film festival business and take a year off. Might I add, at that point, I was still in the space of, well, if I take a year off, people are going to pass me.
Mhm.
I was still in that space. And I took the leap anyway.
I mean, here I am 12 years later. I think I still operate in that space. There's just this like fear that we're going to miss out if we
Human.
actually like step out. But yeah, that woman living her life, synchronicity, really tuning in. Like I feel like I'm tasting that right now. And that's what it's all about is like finding, like doing the work, seeking, praying, loving in order to get to that space. Cause I mean, that's the way to be. So, we'll talk more about that. But okay, so you went to Sedona, you got the download for Illuminate, and then what?
Then I gathered 9 people, only one of whom had ever been to a film festival before.
Wow.
And I trained the 9 people to do the 9 different jobs you needed to do to run a film festival. One being a curator, one being like a marketer, one being, guest services, manager. Like, I mean, all of it. And we birthed the festival in 9 months. It was like my baby. It was totally my baby.
Hmm.
And what I had kind of said to the universe, because remember, I had just been on a 1 year Seek, Pray, Love, right? I spent all day, every day, like in self-awareness, tuning in trying to sense like my intuition. How am I being guided? Where am I being led? And so Illuminate was really born in that flow, like in that connection space. And so, and of course, I realize this in hindsight. I don't think I thought about this while it was happening, but we set some goals, for year one. We're like, okay, this was, by the way, completely grassroots, right? Like I didn't go and get an investor to give me $1 million. No, it was completely grassroots. We were all volunteers. We were all committed to creating something that was bigger than us. We all realized that there was a global consciousness movement happening. We were all passionate about that. We saw that film had a long way to go to really like kind of integrate with that movement. There had been like What the Bleep Do We Know, a film, right, that is metaphysical that kind of, really, really broke through and hit the mainstream, and also The Secret. But at that point, that was almost it. And so many filmmakers had tried to duplicate that, and nobody was making it. So we weren't quite sure the world was ready for a conscious film festival. And at the time, even in 2013, a lot of these ideas, meditation even, wasn't that palatable to the masses. Um, and never yoga was, right? Yoga had already come, but meditation was an iffy kind of thing at the time. And boy, if you started talking about like mediumship or anything, that people were just going to call you woo woo nuts.
Mm-hmm.
So we were like, this thing could just fly or it could flop completely. And we're like, we have no idea, but we're in the flow. So we thought, okay, maybe with our $1,000 marketing budget, right, we could get a handful of people from over Arizona state lines, right? And if we fill 500 seats, we'll know we have something. And maybe if we get a world premiere by year four, we will like know we will have succeeded. And then 9 months later, we didn't put 500 people in seats, we put 2,700. And we didn't just attract five people from over Arizona state lines. We attracted people from 27 US states and 11 countries.
Wow.
And then we didn't just, try and aim for one world premiere by year four. We had four world premieres in year one. And one of those was a film called Death Makes Life Possible, and it was executive produced by Dr. Marilyn Schlitz and Deepak Chopra. So, and both of them came, and that was just like this huge opening that just knocked our socks off. And we just hit an upward trajectory from there. And so we knew that the universe was behind this.
Yeah, that's amazing. And then we entered the scene 4 years later. I was like, oh, the world premiere in 4 years, that's us. But then you killed it the first year.
But it was such a great one. Wow. I distinctly remember that screening. It was actually our largest opening night to date.
Oh,
You'll it really like hit the button for people. It was something that everybody really wanted to explore, a topic everyone wanted to explore.
yeah. Again, flow, timing. It was amazing. Just this is it's so cool when you get that clear download. And then you're just like, okay, well, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm going to trust in this energy, this feeling that I have to do something. Um, so talk to me about, well, first of all, Illuminate's coming up. I'm going to speak on a panel. So I'm very excited. It's going to be the first time that I will be able to go back to Illuminate. It's because my life kind of spiraled with a new kid and all these things going on. So I'm really excited. It's coming up very soon, May 1st.
May
And
1st through the
and
4th.
and you switched. Tell us about that move from Sedona to Santa Barbara.
Yep, we did our first 10 years in Sedona, which was the perfect place to sort of, rock the baby and, have her grow up to be a toddler. And then, it was time for her to go to school. It was time for her to grow up a little. And we decided to move, to a larger city. I think, we were outgrowing the infrastructure a bit. And so last year we moved to Santa Barbara, which welcomed the festival so warmly and graciously. And now the new community has really taken Illuminate under its wing. And we've been, I mean, when I say growing, we've been growing not just kind of the in-person geographically, but we've also been growing the virtual. So we do a whole curation of films that are available to anyone, anywhere, during that week, anytime. So we are operating in 95 countries now.
Wow.
And this is really one of the only opportunities people have to access uh, films that relate to our humanity, who we are, our consciousness, what is possible, right? Mind body connection, our connection to all things, not just the cosmos, but plants and animals and all other living beings. So yeah, May 1st through 4th is in person and May 5th through 11th is global virtual.
So cool. And I love the last time we spoke in preparation for this conversation and just checking in and talking about me being on the panel at the festival. You mentioned the term conscious curious, and I had just spoke those words out loud 20 minutes prior to two of my girlfriends, and we were talking. And I said that exact term. They were like, oh, we've never heard that before. You have to coin that. And then you and I get on the phone and you're like, I like to think of like, the other layer. There's obviously the choir, all of us that are seeking and praying and loving. And then there's the conscious curious. I was like, what? You've already coined the term that I just thought I coined. But anyways, I thought that was pretty cool. What does that mean, conscious curious?
Well, it means exactly kind of where I was at the point where I was leaving Miami Film Festival, right? Which is like, I do love my life, but I really think there's something more. I think there's more meaning, there's perhaps more of a soul's calling, there's something more. And I feel like people who are like looking for that missing piece are conscious curious.
Yeah. And I think COVID might have made a lot of people conscious curious. I think the political climate of making people conscious curious, or maybe going the opposite, like not curious at all, completely shut up. But it's an interesting time, and it's a really beautiful time and a powerful time to do the work that you're doing. So, thank you for being such a good steward for my film and so many others.
Well, thank you. And, you know, filmmakers are the ones who are creating this gateway. It's like, sure, can you get somebody to a seminar or a workshop or whatnot? Getting someone to one of those kinds of things to maybe open up their perspective and introduce them to something new um, is harder than saying, "Hey, want to go watch a movie?"
Yeah.
And so we really want to honor and appreciate the filmmakers that are really doing that.
Mm.
And they're pushing the boundaries a little bit because we're still on the runway, folks. Like we're still, conscious media in general, um, has it's speeding up. There's no question about it, right? You can see all kinds of conscious content on Netflix these days. Uh, but there's just so much more potential. So I just, appreciate the creators because we're not the ones creating.
Mm.
You guys are. And we just want to support and launch and expose more audiences to it and promote their successes.
Yeah. Well, and it's, this stuff is not it's storytelling and it's powerful stuff and I would like you now to talk about how like life imitating art, like the films that you have brought to the world through Illuminate actually became the nourishment you needed on your own healing journey. So can you talk about shortly after Heal premiered at Illuminate, you got a pretty insane diagnosis.
Yeah, and very interestingly, right after Heal premiered at Illuminate. And I don't find that to be a coincidence. I got a diagnosis in 2018, and it was a brain tumor, or more specifically, a pituitary tumor, and not the good kind. And it took a year for them to actually diagnose it. And because it's a very difficult thing to diagnose, you can't just biopsy it. You just have to kind of watch all these other patterns. And it was a hormone producing tumor. So they're measuring your hormones every, couple months, and, they're looking for patterns. So I knew that, brain surgery was inevitable, but I also knew from Heal, and I knew from several other films that I had created that, you know, health is a product of many things. And our abilities and our potential to impact our physical health is much greater than we think it is. And I had watched so many stories of people overcoming huge odds and great obstacles to achieve perfect health, even though maybe the conventional medical approaches weren't working. So I set out even a year before my brain surgery was scheduled to do the inner work. So I learned about the mind-body connection. I learned about energy healing. I learned about the value of food as medicine. I learned about several different modalities that, you know, maybe weren't accepted in the conventional world. And I I implemented all of those things in my own health journey. And so when the actual day of the surgery came, um, I felt like blessed. I felt blessed because I walked in with so much personal power and like love and light that I didn't feel like there was space for fear in the room. And I felt like every surgeon and every nurse was like really on their game because honestly, I had just, and this may sound, really silly to people, right, who again are not, really aware of energy work. But, I had had a whole group of people, um, you know, kind of visualize for me what was happening in that operating room, and, what was happening in my recovery room and all of that kind of stuff. And it really, really felt like I was being held in like golden light. And what's really interesting is that right after my brain surgery, they're basically looking for two indicators that the surgery was successful.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, that evening, um, I essentially um, intuited that neither of those two indicators had occurred. And the surgeon came in to tell me, like, look, we don't really know yet, but just want to let you know that it's possible that we took out the wrong tumor. That's exactly the look I had on my face, which was, what do you mean wrong tumor? There's another tumor.
Yeah.
And they said, well, sometimes there could be like a microscopic tumor. That's the thing that's actually causing the problems and excreting the hormones. And it's possible that we took out the wrong one. And, the only thing you can assume from that is that he went to pathology, and pathology, right, dissected the tumor, and they're like, nope,
Yeah.
big fail. Um, and
Interesting.
then, and then what also happened was that, in order for a surgery like this to be deemed a success, your cortisol levels have to plummet right after the surgery. And that's the main indicator that the surgery was a success. And unfortunately, mine went the wrong direction. My cortisol levels went up and they spiked to a level that was generally unheard of. And the only explanation for that happening is that the tumor that was causing the problem was still in my body and it was causing that spike. So, of course, I that was confirmed by, right, like the nurses gave me the cortisol numbers and all that. And so I researched this from beginning to end, right? So I like knew more than even the nurse knew about what we were looking for. And
Hmm.
so I had, of course, this moment of, oh my God, the surgery failed. And your odds after the first surgery fails just get worse and worse and worse.
Mm.
And this very rare condition, which is, by the way, the odds of even getting this condition is 1 in 1 million. Um, so like the odds would
Not
just
great.
get worse from
Yeah.
that point on. And usually there's a survival rate for this condition that kind of gives you very little hope. Like, it's not immediate, but it's like, let's say it give me 10 more years of life. Um, so I went into first shock, but then deep, deep, deep meditation. And I knew what I had to do because I had done about a year of emotional release work
Mm.
with a practitioner to understand why the tumor had come and what pivot I needed to make in order for the tumor to go away.
Mm.
That's how I thought of it. And what that tumor, and after a year of this work of really examining, my habits, my behaviors, my belief systems, I realized that it had come to deliver a message to me about surrender.
Whew.
I was like a type A. I was always like the achiever from day one. And I was always validated by those achievements. And so it was almost like such a big part of my self-worth that I needed to detach my achievements from my self-worth and, surrender more and go with the flow. Because, clearly what I was doing in my life was being so attached to certain results that I was making myself sick.
Wow. I can relate. So, okay. So surrender. So you went into meditation.
I went into the deepest meditation I've ever experienced in my life. And it was not just surrender, it was surrender of absolutely everything. Like surrender of any form of achievement. Um, it was a, it was a surrender of not being able to walk up the stairs. It was a surrender of not being able to work. It was a surrender of you know not having a brain that could do all the things I wanted to do. I mean, it was all kinds of things because I knew what it meant, right, for this surgery to fail. And I literally had to surrender my attachment to living, which is really you can't surrender more than that. And I actually felt at the end of this 4 hour meditation a deep, deep sense of peace and that I was really in the flow and that this was exactly what my life was meant for. And that maybe I was going to teach or help other people who were going through this achieve some sense of peace with what was going on because wow, my whole lesson was surrender. And look, I learned it. And now I was okay. I was okay with whatever happened.
Mm.
And it was such a sense of lightness and peace. And then an hour later, they took my hormones test again, and it had gone from like 80 something to 40 something. And then they took it 2 hours later and it went from 40 something to 20 something and then 20 something to 16 and then 16 to 11 and then 11 to 4. And as long as it was under 5 twice, I was healed.
Wow. I have crazy chills. Wow.
And I did look up after that fact, like what the probability of having, your cortisol levels spike up to the numbers where it did and then drop to under 5. And from what I can find, there's no medical record of that ever happening. It's literally unheard of.
Wow. I mean, because as you were talking about before you did the meditation, and like, I was like, maybe all the work you had done leading up to the surgery had shifted everything within the tumor so that the tumor wasn't really acting like the pituitary hormone releasing tumor that they thought it was before, because all your transformational work may have shifted the actual kind of energetics of the tumor. Um, but then it seems like something that the full surrender then shifted everything. What is your sense of when it shifted, or was it just layers, or what is your sense of how the miracle unfolded?
It's so funny that you asked me that because I'm still asking myself that. It's like I know what happened. I can't be sure of the how. All I know is that what happened is generally unexplainable but from, by current medical science, and that the most powerful moment of my life was, well, actually, it's the second most powerful. I still have to tell you about the most powerful, but
Right.
um, it was it was kind of a culmination of all that work that I had done over time. And yes, did I think maybe during that time that I was, that the tumor was weakening? Um, Perhaps, but I was focused more on just understanding what I needed to understand in order for the tumor to just take a hike. And so I think that was what I was more focused on.
Hmm. And can you us a sense of like, because I think a lot of people are going to, their ears are going to perk up in all the emotional release work you did. Like, what was the credentials of the practitioner? Like, if someone wants to seek out that, because I think that's going to resonate with a lot of people.
She called herself a medical medium. You know, I think medical mediumship is something different to different people.
Hmm.
For me, I tend to relate, any kind of healing with just personal development work. Like, truly understanding your own belief systems, truly understanding where you're off balance and being really honest with yourself, and then releasing what's not serving you so that you can really truly be who you are, which is this, divine spiritual being in a human body. And, there's just so much garbage we pick up from everywhere as we live. And it's like really just this whole process of like, okay, I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna release that and I'm gonna put this down and I'm not gonna, put my stock in this anymore. And I feel like that's just one of the most powerful processes we can undergo.
Yeah, and there's so many different modalities and practitioners that can get accomplish the same thing. So it's really, as you reconnect with yourself and as you start to excavate and investigate and remember your divine nature and all of those things, and if you can tap into that flow, you'll be led to the right practitioners that are going to access those or help you, come back to you and remove all the junk and distortion in the way.
And can I just tell you how I found that practitioner? She had come to be a volunteer theater manager at Illuminate.
Mm-hmm. Of course she did.
That's how I met her. And I didn't even know she did this kind of work. But when she heard, right, that I was diagnosed, she came to me and she offered her service because she felt like, Illuminate was this very special thing that needed to continue, and that she would like to still see me be able to steward the festival. And so she actually offered that service for over a year free of charge because
Wow.
she believed in what we were doing.
Wow. That's amazing. I mean, I just, the same with Liz and Heal and connecting with Deanne. So you find your people when your intention is to heal, to do to do whatever it takes. And they're gifted to you. What a beautiful story. And I just want to point out, like, this has been my experience kind of right before the fire. Um, I just feel like when we tune in, life is always preparing us for whatever mission, you know, whatever fire we have to walk through. It's like your work, your creating Illuminate actually contained the healing elixir of information and people that then facilitated your healing, your miraculous healing. And I had that same experience with the fire. Like I was on a retreat and I did 2 days of deep, deep forgiveness work at 40 years of Zen. And I was supposed to be there for 5 days and the fire interrupted the second day. Uh, and along with ketamine, which makes you more neuroplastic. I had never been called to do ketamine before, but Dave Asprey explained to me that the science shows that it actually makes your brain more neuroplastic. So I was like, if I'm going to do the work, I might as well enhance it and have that experience of ketamine because people ask me about it and I wanted to have an experience. And that's kind of, I'm the guinea pig and the experimenter. But anyways, all of that to say, like, then the ketamine gives kind of this afterglow of really resilience, mental resilience. So I came home to this like crazy chaos and trauma that a whole city, two cities were experiencing, the whole greater LA. And I had, been gifted this like mental resilience to be able to handle it and kind of ease into this healing process. It was wild. But that's like a speck of your journey is like such a great, I just keep seeing that more and more that life is giving us like within the acorn is the whole oak forest and just to continue to trust that our journey holds all the answers that we need for our specific unfolding.
I am completely in agreement, right? These things that we think are huge challenges are just these opportunities for us to, right, take off these layers and really discover who we truly are. Sometimes it's a little tough to see those challenges in that light as gifts. But you know they are when you reach this place of being so tuned in that then the universe comes in to really support that growth in so many ways, brings you healers, brings you Dave Asprey, brings you, for me, a whole community of people that really came to support me in my healing and made me truly understand, what's possible for me.
Okay, well, if a 1 in a million diagnosis and then a miraculous healing wasn't enough to share, it's followed up by a diagnosis that your husband received shortly thereafter. Can you tell us the second chapter of this incredible story?
Yeah, so chapter two began with us going to an ER in Flagstaff, Arizona, just to check on my husband's heart. It wasn't anything serious. They just wanted to rule some things out. And, he did have a couple of strange symptoms. And they tell us that he has a very serious brain tumor that is very, very hard to get to because it's near the brain stem, and that no hospital in the vicinity will even do that kind of surgery, and that there's a couple of facilities and he'll have to be airlifted to Phoenix immediately. So
And when was this on the timeline after your healing?
this is actually 5 years later.
Okay.
And another synchronicity is that we ended up in the same hospital, in the same ICU, on the same floor, exactly 5 years apart to the day.
What does that mean?
both with brain tumors.
Oh, it's crazy.
Um, so of course, I mean, it was hard to even fathom, because I'm sitting at his bedside going, wait, but this was me who got that diagnosis 5 years ago. It's not him. He was the healthy one. He's always the healthy one. And he's also been the rock, and he's just been the strength of our family. And it was just such a shock. I mean, the man never even gets a cold.
Mm.
And this was also just like a few months after we got married. So, he was obviously feeling like, not, oh, by the way, this tumor, which they then tell us what they believe it is, they believe it's a glioblastoma. It does not have a cure. And the lifespan, upon diagnosis is 12 to 16 months.
Mm.
And there's really nothing you can do. Medical science is not caught up to this type of tumor.
And I just like to, every time you say that, I like to just tell people that traditional, conventional Western medicine has not found a cure, but there have been people who have healed glioblastoma. So there is a way, but the traditional model has not established a cure at this time. But people heal from glioblastoma.
Absolutely. And I knew that 100% because you, Kelly, had just brought to my attention that a new film was coming out. It was called Source. It was created by Dr. Joe Dispenza. And I think it was maybe 2 weeks before this happened, where you put Dr. Joe and I together to world premiere his film, which was all about how meditation, and specifically, I think the meditation that, Joe leads in his, big meditation retreats, how that can create actual progress, physical progress in the body, and how they had an entire kind of medical operation um, out of a hospital in San Diego, I believe, to follow along and scientifically, um, you know, provide, data and evidence that this was indeed happening. So yet again, film, and interestingly, film connected to Kelly, um, have a huge, huge impact on my life and my husband's life. Because even though, right, the surgeons were saying, hey, there's a 99% chance this is a glioblastoma, they can't actually be 100% certain until they take it out and see what it is. And you also cannot do a biopsy of that kind of tumor because it's so deep in the brain. It's 10 centimeters in the brain. And really, anytime you go in there and you just touch areas of the brain, there's brain damage possible.
Mhm.
So they want to do that as little as possible. So they're just going to go in there once and that's it. And even the chance of a glioblastoma is very, very slim. But the chance of healing a glioblastoma is near zero.
Mhm.
It's like 0.0000000, right? One. So, but that's what we went for. And I'll never forget, the one day that I actually saw tears, because I'd never seen him cry.
Mhm.
And it was him going, this can't be it. He has two daughters, and he certainly didn't want to leave me, and he didn't want to leave them.
Mhm.
And so he was obviously distraught beyond measure. And I will never forget when I sat down with him and I said, listen, I just watched this movie, Source, and I'm going to show it to you before your surgery. And there is data that now proves that our mind-body connection can literally heal anything.
Mm.
And there was a scene in that film where 8 people hover around cancer cells in a petri dish in a hospital lab and do remote healing work. And the next scene is one where the doctor is just profoundly stunned that the tests of these cancer cells in a petri dish, right, have shifted in a positive direction.
Hmm.
So between him seeing that and my knowing that, and my saying to him, listen, 5 years ago today, I was a 1% miracle. So you can be too.
Mm. I have chills.
And I won't forget it. In that moment, everything about him changed. It was like this feeling of defeat that totally shifted into a feeling of possibility. And from that moment on, he was the most certain positive person in the room that this was not it for him.
Mm.
And he said that to the doctors and like don't you wait. This is all going to turn out in my favor. I'm going to be your 1% miracle. And of course the doctors said, "Well, that's a really good attitude to have," but they were sort of like, you could see in their mind just being like, "Okay."
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I will add that we had the most incredible doctors and surgeons, and I still do believe in conventional medicine because you know, what they did was take out that tumor.
Yeah.
And that requires incredible precision because typically when you take out a tumor this deep in the brain, the person is paralyzed, the person can't swallow or can't see or can't, is like wheelchair bound for life, a lot of other things. And they managed to take this tumor out with very, very minimal damage.
Mm.
So I will always be eternally grateful for conventional medicine and these particular surgeons.
Totally.
But what was really interesting is that the day after his surgery, and might I add, the day after a brain surgery this deep, someone is like a child again,
Hmm.
right? Because their brain is still swelling so much that actually you know, it starts to conserve energy and it's only using a certain part of the brain. So, people notice major behavioral changes, right? And you're actually wondering whether that person's true personality is ever going to come back. And what's interesting, though, is he was so certain at that point. By the way, we did deep meditations in the hospital every day. Um, and what we did was we visualized, this time we did it differently. This time we visualized and did meditations where we saw the tumor shrinking and losing its power
Mm.
and having it be sort of eaten up by all the healthy cells around it so that it became a nothing burger. That's the word that Drew used. He said, this is going to become a nothing burger. And so I also decided that because, I'm going to be honest, I was completely terrified. I was completely terrified. Even though he felt certain. And when I was in his presence, I felt certain. But when I would walk out of the hospital room and like go to the hospital cafeteria, I would just bawl my eyes out um, and be like, imagining being a widow, right, in my 40s. And it was a really, really, really tough time.
Mm. Yeah.
And I was like willing to do literally anything possible, right, to save his life. And I knew it was possible because of everything that I have seen and all of these stories and Source and Heal and every other film that made me realize like there is a reality beyond just this physical body. And those tools are more powerful than any of the tools that we actually have at our disposal that are tangible.
Yeah.
And so I went on a like remote healing recruitment rampage.
Okay.
And I got not just our family and our friends, and all of their churches and synagogues and mosques to pray and visualize this tumor shrinking. Um, I I actually asked a favor of almost everybody who would come to Illuminate, every healer, every spiritual teacher, every energy worker. I literally had Amma in India praying for Drew with a picture of him and the time and the date of his surgery. I tapped every resource I possibly can so that we could all collectively basically visualize this tumor, right? Losing all of its power. And 6 weeks later, we didn't get the results for 6 weeks because pathology was unclear and they didn't trust it. But we found out 6 weeks later that he did not have a glioblastoma, that he had a grade 1 tumor, which was benign, and that they have never in their experience of 1,400 brain surgeries a year seen this before.
Wow. I have crazy chills. Oh my God. Two 1% miracles.
Two 1% miracles. And just, you know, the odds of having this grade 1 tumor is not, 5%, let's say 5 in 100, not 5 in 1,000, not 5 in 10,000 or 100,000. It's 5 in 1,000,000. So just the odds that he was diagnosed with this is actually the definition of a miracle. It's like basically, kind of beating the odds to the point of, you know, lack of scientific explanation, right?
Yeah.
So that was miracle number two. And I'll tell you this, we will never, we will never believe that we are just our mental, emotional, physical bodies.
Hmm.
Like we could never go back
Yeah.
into what for me is now limited thinking. Now I think about our spiritual and energetic body and what is possible with that because it's honestly unlimited.
Mm.
And one other very, very special experience came out of this whole multi-miracle story. And that is a true understanding of our true nature. And that happened the day after surgery at Drew's bedside. And this is what I was referring to earlier when we talked about like the most profound moment of my life.
Mm.
And I said the one of surrender was number two for me.
Wow.
So number one was sitting by his bedside and looking at Drew and all of a sudden feeling like we are in some other realm, that we are not just surrounded by love, but we are love, and love is all that exists. And it felt like we were not in um, our self. That had all dissolved, and we were just there together. And I didn't know at the time whether this was just because our love for each other was so strong, or if it was because literally we had the most incredible energy coming in from all over the world,
Yes.
to hold us and support us and lift us into this vibration and this frequency. And it was pure and absolute peace and bliss. And I remember thinking, wow, it doesn't matter what happens. Like, he could move on to the next realm and I could still be on this earth, but it doesn't matter because this is who we are. And actually, this love is going to transcend all of that because this is the nature of reality. And it didn't, nothing mattered. Whatever happened for the rest of my life or his life, it was completely irrelevant.
Mm.
And because we were in our true essence. And that is a moment that I think that I had maybe been hoping to have through my whole spiritual path. I mean, I'd read about it, right? I'd heard about people going through near-death experiences and feeling the light. Like I'd read Anita Morjani's book, right? I had sort of read about it, but I'm that kind of person that doesn't really adopt anything until I experience it.
Yes, I feel
So
you.
I still had a question mark. You too?
Wow. I mean, that is what a gift, first of all, to because that's what I'm like. If we can bottle the experience that Anita Morjani had in the other realm, where she felt and thousands, countless of other people that have had near-death experiences where they, you know, uh, drop their physical illusion and they're just source and they meld back with source and have that oneness, unity consciousness, and they feel that love, which doesn't have any language in our, in this 3D realm, like to define it, but you experienced that bliss, that expansion, that oneness. And I do, as you were talking, I was like, it's that field of love that collectively from all over the world, people were sending you and visualizing and where two or more are gathered, like this is the miracles are possible, and so I just love that you had that experience because as I'm listening to your stories, like one, obviously you're embodying and have experienced what I truly believe and know, which is why I made Heal, what's possible, and we're only tapping the surface of that potential. And but as we're getting more and more examples of what's possible and learning about stories of what people have done to shift the energy and create this miracle, experience this miracle. I mean, it's just like, how can you not believe that anything is possible? And then you're giving us pieces of the recipe of the formula, because I was like, Anita, we can't just like initiate a near-death experience. So like, how can we experience that love, that source of which we are made and of which we'll go back to and of which we forget about in this kind of illusion of 3D world, in this, kind of human experience. And you just shared with us like one of the recipes, which is just I've experienced it at Joe Dispenza with those cage with the group healings, and Lynn McTaggart's work. It's like when we set the intention and it's a loving intention from our heart and we're in a coherent state and we're all sending it to this one point of consciousness, which was Drew in this moment and you, like you could actually feel that shift occur and you could experience that expansion and oneness to the point where there is nothing to fear. It's like you had the experience of, I am love. Love is all there is. Love is where we're going back to when we leave these human bodies, and it's eternal. And then we come back, and whatever it is that we do, there is nothing to fear. And I think when we can let that tension go out of our body, vitality just floods the system, and we're back in that coherent resonance with our true nature, which is divine love. I
Isn't
mean,
it magic? Isn't it magic? I mean,
it's magic. And you guys repeated the formula. And I think that's what's so powerful about your story. And I promise you, Drew needs to write his story in a book or both of you together. And it's got to be titled Nothing Burger. I love that. Just Nothing Burger.
that's
But
actually a great idea. I love it.
but to have two people with slightly varying but the same kind of deadly brain tumor diagnosis, and then you repeated the formula and it worked both times. Like, to me, I think your stories are such a testament to my work and what my exploration and my understanding. I'm just so grateful that you were able to share it here for our audience. Ugh, it's amazing.
Well, thanks, Kelly. I've only told this story once publicly before, so I'm a little vulnerable with it. And, I am still in an honest inquiry, about like shared death experiences, about, Drew and, the experience he had when he was under. He did kind of go into the light and had to choose. And, there were just so many things that happened. And let me just tell you, like, Drew is like a science guy through and through. And so, and I actually knew that he wasn't going to be able to remember what he was saying in the days after surgery. So I audio recorded it, and he still hasn't listened to it yet because he's I guess a little bit nervous, but it was so clear that there were so many forces beyond, right, our physical reality at play. And he knew it too, but he also was like, oh, let's keep things simple. But I'll tell you this is that I think what's really important now in my inquiry going forward is just like, how do I then take this experience and like move it forward? Like, how can this impact the world? How can this, generate, positivity and love for others, for our community, for our society? Um, and I think the answer is number one, just being love, even in the most difficult situations where you're triggered and you just want to like argue with somebody, and just remember that moment of who we are is the gift to bring back with us. And I know that it brought my and Drew's love to a deeper place. Like, we didn't even think that was possible, but it really did. And it also made us value like love and wisdom and connection over everything else, over achievement, over, remodeling our second bedroom, whatever. It really, all that other stuff has just become really not that important. And the way that we move through life and the energy that we move through life is just like, it's everything now. So, anyway, thanks for letting me share this experience as I even work through it myself, and for also just supporting everybody's healing journeys, Kelly, with all of the work that you do, and, reflecting as a mirror, right? Our journey as humans to be the spiritual beings that we are.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, everybody come to Illuminate and hang with us and find out more and deepen your understanding by seeing all the incredible films that will be at this year's festival and beyond. Where can people find out about Illuminate and you?
IlluminateFilmFestival.com. Tickets actually went on sale today.
Okay, good. Awesome. Well, I can't wait to see you and hug you. And I'm just so grateful. Your stories are truly going to be a beacon of hope for millions of people. So thank you for sharing today.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you for listening to the Heal with Kelly podcast. Be sure to tune in every Thursday for more empowering wisdom and inspiring healing stories. And make sure you hit the follow button on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss that one episode that holds the answer you've been searching for. Oh, and if you found this episode inspiring, please rate, review, and share Heal with Kelly so that we can grow our audience and reach more people. We truly appreciate it. Lots of love.